All right, folks, this is a lecture from chapter 14, which is part of section 5, the economy. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. Most folks don't know a whole lot about what the economy is, and if there's ever a topic that we deal with in a superficial way, it's the economy. And if there's ever a topic that we really need to dive below the surface to see what lies beneath, in order to get a better understanding of what we're dealing with at the surface, it's the economy. So, what does it mean to work in America? Well, workers are more productive than ever. Yet, job security is low. And as a result, many people are working longer hours, especially people at higher income levels, in order to prove their loyalty or achieve those marginal benefits. In recent American history, especially as the economy has declined in previous years, the landscape of our workforce has changed. For instance, there are fewer jobs available than historically, which is what's driving that economic insecurity. The fact that there's less jobs available gives employers the opportunity to be more selective when they choose their workers, and it gives them leverage over the workers when they want to get more out of them. They can tell them that if their performance is not the best, well, there are plenty of other people lined up wanting to take that job. This has contemporary workers working harder and trying to make sure they are able to keep their jobs. There's less emphasis placed on loyalty to employees because priority is placed on profit, and employees are a big expense. These considerations are changing work in America. Something that you need to understand, at least in the corporate fields, corporations are in business to make money, and therefore they're going to try and minimize cost and maximize gains. And once you streamline the line of production, the physical process of producing whatever it is that you produce, well, then you're going to start looking at other places to gain profit. And the two that jump off the page, of course, are labor and regulations. So when the federal government passes regulations saying that you have to pay a minimum wage, or you have to provide benefits, or you have to protect the environment, then that costs corporations money. So that one place that they're going to try and reduce their payload is in regulations. And then the other place is the actual wage itself. How much can they get away with paying for a position of this quality? And then how much can they whittle away at that once that wage is established? We also have what is called a creative class in America these days. This is a category of workers in many different occupations and industries, united by the fact that creativity is central to their productive work. This is a fast-growing, well-paid segment of the workforce and is now in high demand. The places that jump off the page, of course, Google, Apple, many of the tech startups. Creativity is one feature that distinguishes humans from other animals. So creativity is generally considered to be very important in the human experience. Unfortunately, though, many jobs deny people the opportunity to be creative. Even though we have a developing creative class within the American workforce, we still have a lot of jobs that really don't allow the individual to be human in the position. and it ultimately over time takes its toll. When we look back at where history and capitalism meet up, well, one place we start is the feudal system, which came before capitalism in Europe. This system began to change as early as the 15th century with the enclosure movement, which forced people off what had been public land and sent them looking for work in cities. The enclosure movement starting the thinking about private land and using private land for profit or personal gain. So this enclosure movement is designed to move people off of the land, and they were not moving at their own behest, folks. They were not interested in uprooting themselves from someplace that they knew might have been bad, it might have been good, but it was just something that they knew, and moving into the cities. This just was not a pleasant thought for them. So it took something like an enclosure movement that forced them to move. And of course, this can be epitomized by the expression the haves and the have-nots, as those who were without private land had to pay those with private land for the necessary resources. So it's those in power that move people off of the public land, privatize it, and then construct a form of economy based on privatization, which ultimately becomes a big factor as we move forward with the development of capitalism. In the 18th century, we find new farming technologies which lead to an agricultural revolution. This helps increase the population and the value of the land. It creates an innovation in manufacturing and transportation technology, and it allows for this new increased labor pool to fill new jobs. So as the economy becomes more diverse, more economic positions open up, and people coming in can fill those. You have to remember that tools and innovations make the work easier and also increase the production of food and necessary resources. When there's a surplus of food and resources, the population can increase. When there's not, then we'll see population decline. The agricultural revolution and industrialization ultimately changed society in specific ways. We move our economy from a barter-based system where you trade services for services to a form of legal currency which allows us to buy and sell goods. And we move from agreements between individuals to contracts between corporations. The use of currency rather than barter is a huge change in the way that humans interact with one another. This enabled people more flexibility for gaining what they needed. In the days of barter, if you would need to find a chicken owner who needed cows, that might be difficult. But with currency, these constraints are eliminated because we can determine what a chicken is worth, and we can determine what a cow is worth. And we can break that down into monetary value, and we can exchange that legal currency instead of having to exchange said number of chickens for one cow. It just becomes easier to engage in economic transactions in our society. If you're going to understand capitalism, then you really need to understand Adam Smith. Adam Smith was an economist who believed that competition helps maintain a cohesive society. He believed that specialization increases productivity and innovation, and that using money rather than barter makes trading more efficient. Adam Smith wrote what many consider as the classic economic Bible of capitalism, called The Wealth of Nations. Produced it in 1776. One of the things that is often not talked about as much with Adam Smith is the companion piece that I feel he wrote, which was The Moral Sentiments of Man. And the reason the moral sentiments of man is important is because it talks about an important piece that doesn't get much airtime these days in reference to how a capitalist economy is going to work. If, for example, the invisible hand of the market is going to allow for supply and demand to marry up itself in a way that's harmonious, well, it's going to do so because of a particular fellow feeling. And this is what he called it, a fellow feeling that was observed by the two parties engaging in the economic transaction. This fellow feeling was essentially a respect for the other. You would not want to take advantage of someone else because you respected them. And this respect for the other would allow for the rightful price to take shape because neither one of the parties would be trying to take advantage of the other. This, of course, is not driving economic transactions in modern-day capitalism these days. There's no respect for the other between corporations and individual buyers and sellers. That just doesn't exist anymore. And then the other is that money should flow through as many hands as you can possibly get it through in an economy. Those economies where money flows through everybody's hands do better than economies that allow for a large capturing of wealth in small pockets that then don't get redistributed through the economy. This, of course, is clearly what we have today. We have large pockets of wealth being captured by small groups of corporations run by individuals, and it's creating some problems for modern day capitalism that are proving hard to move past. Jörg Simmel is another important figure if you're trying to understand capitalism. He believed that changing from piecework payment to wage labor to a salary would depersonalize exchange. This is a great way to separate public and private spheres and give workers more freedom to enjoy the private or leisure spheres of life. With a transition to capitalism and the trade with currency rather than barter, corporations and employers would find it easier to deal with employees in a professional manner. You might think to yourself whether it is better to have a depersonalized workplace or if personalization helps to facilitate a better workplace. Which one do you like better? Think about that, folks. Do you like a workplace that you walk in and it's just this depersonalized environment where you just do your work and then you go your separate ways? Or are you more interested in something that is more personal, enjoyable? Of course, Karl Marx is another important figure. He stated that capitalism created an alienation in workers, which of course Jörg Simmel was getting at in the previous slides, including alienation from products they produced, from the production process, from other workers, and from themselves and their creative tendencies. He predicted both that capitalism would ultimately destroy itself and that working class would rise against the capitalist class, leading to a period first of socialism and then one of communism. Ultimately, Marx was concerned about the results of all of this. He believed that the switch to currency, the switch to salary, and the specialization of professionals leads to an ultimate alienation in the workplace. In other words, people become separated from each other. They can become separated from their work and from the creative process itself. Marx suggested that alienation leads to a discontent, an anomie, a sense of normlessness in society, which of course Durkheim has laid claim to as well. So unlike mercantile market exchanges where, say, you build a chair, you build the entire chair by yourself, and then you sell it, well, you are connected to that chair. But if you break down the building of that chair into 100 parts where 100 different people make that chair or make each part and then you assemble it, well, you've stolen the meaning of the chair itself. And workers lose out in this process.